I don't know about you, but me personally, I love a good movie. Whether it be a lighthearted Adam Sandler flick about controlling your anger, or a gut-wrenching indie film about the dangers of obesity and becoming an online college professor, movies are one of the most popular forms of media for a reason. They teach us, entertain us, and most importantly, keep us distracted from the 7-foot-tall shadow man in the corner of our rooms. But with that being said, it's also important to acknowledge that not all movies are good. Some movies, for one reason or another, don't always hit the mark. Whether it be the fault of a bad script, rushed production, or an inexperienced director, not all movies can be Paddington 2. In the cinema world, we have to acknowledge the Tusks, the Morbiuses, the Rooms, because if we don't, we're just doomed to repeat the same mistakes that birthed these atrocities. Of course, it can be a bit embarrassing to have a major flop under your belt when you are a company known for making movies, but regardless, it happens to everyone and it's nothing to be too ashamed about. Though, for some film companies, the embarrassment is just too much to handle. Some lash out at the public, do pathetic diversion tactics, or worst case scenario, get bullied into not making a movie of the same kind for 30 years. Fellas, today I'm here to talk to you about the 1993 live-action Mario movie. This movie, for a variety of reasons I'm about to dive into, is not one that is remembered quite fondly by, well, anyone. It was made at a time when video games were a relatively underdeveloped medium of entertainment, and directors weren't exactly sure how to translate what was good about them into full-length digestible movies. One could even argue that that's still the case today, but undoubtedly, there definitely was an untapped market there. And it makes sense why the movie was made. It just most likely did not need to be as bad as it was. Mario was and still is a franchise known for its almost childlike fantasy setting with bizarre characters and strange Italian stereotypes, but its theatrical adaptation did not do a great job representing that. It was dark, grimy, a little too inspired by Ghostbusters, and only had very minor references to the source material. It's hard to tell what went wrong with the production of this film. A Mario movie sounds like a great idea in hindsight. I mean, hell, a new one's set to come out in April this year and it looks pretty damn good. So why couldn't it have been accomplished in 1993? A time when Mario was arguably more popular than he is now. Well, to tell the story, we have to go back to its ugly, delusion-filled beginning. So sit back, grab a snack, and prepare to hear the story of the Mario movie that Nintendo doesn't want you to know about. Transition.
Hey degenerates, just a little jump scare warning. This next bit was filmed the day before my haircut, and I'm so sorry. If you can find it in your heart to watch the rest of the video, I will literally fucking pay. I'm so fucking sorry.
In the early 90s to late 80s, it felt pretty damn good to be Nintendo. I mean, they single-handedly revived the home console market with the NES, and had very little to worry about in terms of competition. Not to state the obvious, but Nintendo was kind of in their bag when they made this shit, and the whole entertainment industry was starting to take note, particularly one Universal Pictures. In 1990, Universal released a film called The Wizard about a neurodivergent gaming prodigy and ended up paying Nintendo $100,000 to use their logos, franchises, and games in the film. However, Nintendo later ended up regretting the decision to take the money and allowing the movie to be made. Nintendo, for whatever reason, was upset they didn't have more creative control with the movie, and wanted to have more say in the final product as opposed to just, you know, selling away the rights to their image. Which is fair, I suppose, but also a bit ironic considering what happened next. When the company finally began getting serious about putting together a real Mario-related movie later that year, they heard multiple million-dollar pitches from a variety of big studios, but ended up rejecting nearly all of them due to the lack of creative control they offered. So instead, they opted for something a little bit more indie, and ended up with the married couple director duo, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel. Despite the couple's claim to fame being music videos with very impressive computer graphics for its time in the bizarre Max Headroom show, Rocky and Annabelle were very thrilled to start work on a Mario film adaptation, if not with their own strange conditions. See, Morton and Jankel were really more interested in developing a movie based on their own vision and lore with a big Super Mario sticker on it rather than actually working on a Mario-related movie. Rocky Morton even stated numerous times in many different interviews that he saw the movie as the real story of the Mario Brothers, and all the games as just inaccurate parodies of what really happened. Huh? If your opinion reflects anything close to mine, you're probably thinking, why the hell did Nintendo hire these guys? You can't just replace all the lore of a given franchise with fan fiction and expect it to turn out alright. But putting yourself in the shoes of Nintendo, there was probably no telling how bad this could have turned out. Direct movie to video game adaptations weren't really a real thing before this movie. There have been TV shows and cameos and practically anything else you can think of, but movies were just in a weird spot with video games. There were no real guidelines on how to make these things, and Nintendo just kinda had to roll with it. Morton and Jankel, however, assured Nintendo that going for a more adult direction would help broaden the film's appeal, and I guess it worked. And after finalizing their decision on the directors, all Nintendo really needed was a script, and this was where things got kinda messy. The film ultimately hired a whopping 9 writers to complete the job, yet a majority of their ideas and written work were either scrapped, rejected, or just intended for different directors. No one in charge or in the writing room could seem to figure out a proper tone for the movie, and it was starting to affect the schedule and annoy financial backers. There's a whole lot of rewriting and back and forth the scripting phase went through that I won't go into for time's sake, but if you are interested in specifics, feel free to pause the video and read about it to your heart's content. But eventually, a script was decided on that apparently was so good that it managed to get Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, and Dennis Hopper to all sign on to the movie. However, soon after that, Morton and Jankel made the very spontaneous decision to fucking change the script without telling the actors or the producers. You can imagine how well that went over. And right as everyone was settling into their first few days on set, most of the actors were dismayed to find that the script they ended up with were not the ones they signed up for. And it wasn't just small changes here or there either. They had script doctors on set, actively changing things throughout the majority of the 15-week shooting. So much so that a lot of the actors didn't bother learning any of their lines before shooting began. In fact, the actors for Iggy and Spike decided very early on that they were simply going to improvise every line that they had because they knew the writing department wouldn't care, which they were right about. The writing crew even deemed the dialogue better than the written dialogue, which isn't a high bar to pass anyways, but really? Many other wacky hijinks and incidents on set included 1. Bob Hoskins breaking his finger while recording, which led him to wear a cast throughout the rest of the filming process. 2. The directors pouring hot coffee on extras because they didn't look dirty enough. 3. John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins regularly drinking before shooting to make their time on set slightly more bearable. 4. Dennis Hopper throwing a baby tantrum and delaying shooting by 3 hours just to get his frustrations out on the directors and yell at them. 5. Morton and Jankel were actually at one point barred from even working on some scenes and reshoots in the movie due to their general irresponsibility and bad taste they left in literally everyone's mouths. By the time shooting was wrapping up, producers were preparing for the worst and not really expecting to make back any of the $50 million they spent trying to make the movie. They still somehow managed to salvage 90 minutes of usable footage, but it seemed like the film was already beyond repair. And keep in mind, at this point, Morton and Jankel were still practically banned from touching the movie any further, and they both knew the film could only spell disaster for their careers. They had a ticking time bomb strapped to their chest, and all they could do was wait for it to go off. And then the movie came out. But before I dive into the aftermath of this movie, I think it would be at least smart to review the contents of it to give you some context as to how people felt when it came out. In the intro of this video, I briefly described how the plot of this movie did not do a great job representing the source material. But just how badly did they fuck up? Well, a good place to start is probably the opening sequence, which describes the overall lore of the universe in a nice Jurassic Park-style explanatory video. Basically, when the dinosaurs got hit by the meteor, it created an alternate world underground called Dino Hat, where all the dinosaurs got transported to. I think. In the movie, there's no real mention of the Mushroom Kingdom or anything similar to that, so one just has to assume this is the fucked up Morton and Jankel version of that. But moving past the general lore of the universe, this movie opens up with the distressed woman bumbling around in New York in the rain with what seems to be a baby in her arms. Well, a baby inside an egg with a stick of meteorite strapped to it, but regardless, she drops the baby off at some church, and this ends up pissing off Bowser, who we can only assume is the father to this fucked up ugly lizard baby. We then flash forward to Brooklyn in the 90s to find her 2 favorite Mario brothers broke and desperate for plumbing work, fiending for any broken toilets they can get their hands on. Meanwhile, fucked up lizard baby is now a grownish woman in her early 20s named Daisy, who likes digging up dinosaur bones and beefing with the fucking NYC Mafia. Not exactly an accurate depiction of her from the games, but this is a rather tame crime in comparison to the rest of the movie. One thing leads to another, and the Mario brothers come in contact with fucked up lizard girl, and Luigi quickly develops feelings. Mario then wingmans him a bit, and Luigi ends up swooning Daisy Jersey with his Italian plumber Riz and takes her on a nice romantic date in a construction site. Anyway, as the pair are having the time of their lives fooling around in a fucking sewer, their fun soon gets interrupted by the mafia unscrewing pipes for some reason. But anyways, Luigi calls up Mario and they fix it up because they're plumbers, and of course they fix it. But while they're getting down and dirty, Bowser's henchmen Iggy and Spike snatch Daisy and run off like it's nobody's business. They take her to some magic wall teleporter and just kind of dissolve into it. Sort of reminds me of the painting mechanic they had in Mario 64 in that one level where you can just run into a wall and get teleported to God knows where. And it's kind of cool that they inadvertently predicted that, but that's about all the brownie points this movie gets from me. Overall, this really wasn't that bad of an opening to the movie. I mean, it really could have gone anywhere from this point. But what followed sort of embodies everything wrong with most video game movies, in my opinion. Just the blatant disregard and disrespect for the source material. Instead of embracing the compelling and unique concepts/ideas Mario had, Martin and Jankel viewed video games as just another loud thing to distract kids with, and figured the only way to transform the medium into something adults could possibly enjoy was by redesigning the franchise in its entirety. When Mario and Luigi arrive in Dino Hatton, it's like looking at a corporate-generated cyberpunk dystopia that wants to be literally anything else but the Mushroom Kingdom. It's like they took one look at Biff's future in Back to the Future Part 2, drew it from memory, and then just added a bunch of fucked up old ladies to it. It doesn't represent jack shit close to the games, and it set a horrible precedent for the future of video game movies. More famously, the director for the Prince of Persia movie adaptation stated in an interview that he could not get past the first stage of the game, and decided that video games were just incapable of making the audience feel human emotion and connection, just because he personally did it. He then went on to state that he wasn't very fond of video games. Didn't stop him from making a movie about it. But getting back to the topic at hand, another thing that bothered me and plenty of other people heavily about this movie is that the characters made to represent the ones from in-game are so unrecognizable to the point of genuine bizarreness. You've already met Mario and Luigi, who aren't too bad, but look at how they massacred my boy Toad. He's a hippie now who sings protest songs, and who gave the thumbs up to this fucking cut, man? You couldn't get me to fix my shit like that if you had a gun to my head. And if this wasn't bad enough, Toad later in the movie gets punished for protesting and gets de-evolved into a Goomba, which looks like this. Boy, if you don't just can't, man. I can't defend this. I remember being a kid scrolling through YouTube poop or whatever the hell 8-year-olds who were like me looked up at the time. And I remember crystal clear seeing this fucking guy jump scare me in a thumbnail. And I've just never been the same. And every time I imagine the Grim Reaper, I just imagine its face. So say what you want about the movie. Say what you want about the director. Say what you want about Nintendo. But nothing can put into words how this image makes me feel. And it's not a good feeling. This is the moment where Morton and Jankel should have paused and just realized maybe it's time to cut your losses. But sadly, this is real, and it makes me sad. And that's about all I have to say about that. If you're curious about the rest of the movie's plot, it's a short summary is that Daisy basically was really captured because she's apparently the true princess of Dino Hatton, and the lost piece of meteorite she was born with is the tool Bowser needs to recombine Dino Hatton to Earth, because he wants to be a dictator there too. And then Mario and Luigi run from the cops in Dino Hatton, dance with a few hookers, and I don't mean that like metaphorically or like as a joke. These were genuine hookers that they just got onto the set, and then they get jumpy suits and they de-evolve Bowser and they go back to the surface. But Daisy wants to stay because she needs to take care of her own now, and they turn the mafia into a monkey, because the 90s had a weird fascination with monkeys, and this movie wasn't an exception. But then they get home and they're dubbed the Super Mario Brothers because they saved everybody from Dennis Hopper and that horrible, awful haircut. Anyways, let's talk legacy. When the film came out, the box office and critics were not very kind to it. Respectfully. Even still today, some people are pretty damn vicious towards this movie. It's me, I don't like this movie. Seth Rogen even stated in an interview relating to his new role that the old one is one of the worst movies ever made. To say this movie wounded Nintendo's ego and ruined Morton and Jankel's film career would be a bit of an understatement. But with the bad came a lot of good. For one, it somehow got nominated for an Oscar, but just as book to movie adaptations had evolved before for it, so had game to movie adaptations. The Super Mario Bros. Movie gave a big, glowing poster child example of what not to do with video game adaptations, and most directors took a lesson from it. And now, while there's not too many of them, good video game movie adaptations are not an absurd, far-off idea anymore. We now have movies that, at the very least, respect their source material, and don't just treat it as some wacko, loud medium for kids with ADHD. And it puts a smile on my face that we're finally making progress in the world, even if it is just in a very small, unimportant subcategory for entertainment. Ladies and degenerates, I would like to thank you all for watching my stupid video, and I wish to all of you a very long shower. Also, subscribe if you like the new Mario movie, and let me know in the comments what your favorite video game movie adaptation is. And I'll see you soon. Bye. I'm gonna stop.